Okay, at this time, I'd like to call a Placerville City Council meeting together of the 28th. Excuse me. Are you done? Would you all please stand and join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Ms. Zito, would you please call roll?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hagan. Councilmember Borelli?
Here.
Vice Mayor Hagan?
Here.
Councilmember Patton?
Here.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Here.
Mayor Mattson is noted as absent.
Thank you. Any announcements or presentations to the public? Seeing none. Closed session report, City Attorney Driscoll.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hagan. The council did not take reportable action in closed session tonight.
Thank you. Any changes or adjustments to the agenda?
I move for the adoption.
Second.
It's moved and seconded. Did you get those? It's by Borelli and second by Patton. Call for the question. All in favor?
Aye.
Unanimous. Ceremonial matters, there are none scheduled. Public comment. Brief non-agenda items. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the council on any matter not on the agenda. Any comments? Any concerns? Mr. Price.
Is this, okay.
I was going to keep it quiet this time.
Okay, yes. What I'd like to say is that the proposed roundabout Clay Street Bridge replacement, realignment of Clay Street, and pedestrian and bike trail I shall refer to as the project. The City of Placerville, the respondents, and Friends of Hangtown, Historic Hangtown petitioner, to which I am a member of the plaintiff group, filed in Superior Court and was granted a writ of mandamus filed October 24th, 2012. Based on the court order, my belief is the city or the city council is in contempt of court. Page 1 states, you, the City of Placerville, are ordered to refrain from further consideration of the project. You are expressly ordered to stop from talking or taking or considering action without following specified items first. The City of Placerville has acted in such a way that you acted in a lawless fashion, that you abused your discretion, and that you didn't follow legal procedures. The writ of mandamus states, page 1, number 2 and 3, all orders and findings to be voided and set aside. Order to suspend all activities related to this project for consideration. The reason this council are in contempt of court is that you did exactly what the judge said not to do. By taking action and voting on leaving the roundabout in the project by a 3-2 vote, to make it even more offensive, the city manager's report you directed him to provide was based on some materials and findings looked at as old information to be set aside and determined to be inadequate by the court. Now, it does not matter that the vote was 3-2. You, the 5 council members, acted collectively as a group. Frankly, if all you want to do is talk this over and drag this out, I would just as soon file a motion of contempt of court now rather than later. Please don't take this as a threat. It is not a threat. It only vindicates the authority of the court and actions as I see it. We should not be in this place now. The city has spent over $200,000 of taxpayer money in legal fees and in studies and in staffing. How much more, I'm not sure. I would say at least a couple $100,000. We're looking at approaching $500,000 to this point. when it's so obvious that the testimonies given were fair argument, the city still took this to court and wasted the taxpayers' money to defend this project, which I believe is not less than 80% of the citizens being against it. Gathering support for this project is not one of the city's strong points. In fact, the more you push this project down the people, the more resentment it builds. Further actions to be taken now lie with the decisions of this council body. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Any other public comments?
Sort of a PS to David, a reminder which came to me belatedly that in 2011, when we were kind of at the height of discussions, Mayor Machado at that time said to all of us that what he was finding was amazing was that he was hearing from well-respected people in the community that I trust and respect, that almost to a person I'm finding that there is no traction and no support for the roundabout. And interestingly, now Mayor Madsen supported him immediately after that, saying, "It's interesting that you bring this up tonight because I too have had very similar discussions." And I think the point of this is that the group that brought suit against the roundabout have been castigated as misrepresenting the people of Placerville. I suspect that those people probably don't travel in the same circles as David Machado and Wendy Madsen. So you have two groups of people who are saying similar things, and it's probably not a bad idea to remember that. The second thing is I would like to thank the city of Placerville, having said that, for their very speedy response this past weekend to what I consider to be malicious damage at totally pointless vandalism at City Park. On Friday night when I was there with my dogs, it was fine. On Saturday morning when I arrived, it was a disgrace. Somebody had had a really great time vandalizing that property, and I felt heartsore for Rotary, who's put so much time and money into it, and I felt subsequently heartsore for the City of Placerville staff who came up and cleaned on their what had been weekend time for them with their families, came up on both Saturday and Sunday to make the place respectable, and they did a great job, and they're great guys. And I thank the City of Placerville for that prompt response. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Emma. Any other comments? Seeing none. I'd like our city attorney to respond to the first accusation that we are in contempt of court, because I don't believe we are, from what I understand about. I believe we have a mandate to perform an EIR if we're going to move forward.
On a project. And we have to determine what the project is before you can do the EIR, because
Correct.
the EIR needs to have a project to analyze. That's really the only comment I would like to make on that, because otherwise I think we might be getting into areas where comments I would make could be construed as providing legal information that I would otherwise be providing to the council, for example.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Any written communication besides in the agenda packet? I believe went to the public also was a letter that I read to the during the presentation to the sister city of Warwabi, Japan delegation. Any additional written communication? Seeing none. And I guess I just did the oral communication backwards, so apologize. Consent calendar. Any changes or requests from the staff, or I'm sorry, from council on consent calendar?
Move for approval. Second.
Been moved and seconded. At this time, I'd like to open it for public comment. Any questions or comments on items 8.1 through 8.6?
I think I can't do it now, but I do have a correction to the minutes 7.2 of last week. I've left a copy of my correction with Susan Zito, and if I'm not here when you get around to that in 3 or 4 hours' time, she has it. Thank you. Or can I do it now? No, not technically.
Is that a typo, Susan?
It's not, I wouldn't call it a typo. Mrs. Veerkamp stated that, well, let me just read what it says. I think it's clear enough. That the minutes indicate that she requested the city initiated an investigation. And her response was that she had decided to ask the authorities to make a formal investigation into the matter of verbal assault or perhaps attempted extortion of one of our business owners. In the next few days, I will be contacting the police and district attorney. And she would prefer that the minutes read verbatim what she had said.
Simply because I wasn't asking the city to do it. That's the difference. Is that okay? Thank you.
So can we? Okay, it's one and the same. So if it's grammatical correction,
Here, mic's on.
if it's grammatical correction, we'll make that. Mike?
Good evening, Michael Drobish, Placerville. On 8.5, is Prop 1B just a one-time thing, certain amount of money, and then it's gone?
Dave, you go ahead and answer that.
Proposition 1B was bond funds that were, bonds that were issued several years ago. Smaller cities received a minimum of $400,000, which we did. And this is one of the projects that's being funded out of those funds.
Okay. Seeing nobody else coming forward? It sounds like it's a grammatical correction on the minutes, if that's the case, or you can review.
If I have the council's direction to alter the minutes, I will revise them tomorrow.
Okay.
If you're in concurrence. And I need to do a poll vote for the consent calendar.
Okay. All those in favor, would you do a roll call, please?
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan?
Aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
Thank you. That motion passes. We're under, there are no, under item 9, first reading of the amendment to the zoning ordinance. Actually,
I don't have.
it's public hearings, okay, sorry, that's, so there's a correction, yeah.
Right, we noted it that way because it is technically an ordinance, but it also requires a public hearing, so we noted it there
Okay.
and then listed under the public hearing.
So item 10.1 then, first reading of the ordinance amending the text of various sections of the zoning ordinance, municipal code title 10, Mr. Painter.
Yes, thank you. Good evening. Tonight, staff is bringing forward various amendments to the zoning ordinance. Several of them reflect uses that, well, in this case, the medical cannabis dispensary use is noted a couple times in the code. As the council is well aware, back in November of 2011, council declared that use as prohibited within the city limits of Placerville. However, those two code sections referenced in the staff report, we failed to make those changes at that time. We are doing so tonight with this ordinance before you this evening. Other changes involve clarification regarding the definitions of mobile home and mobile home park. In our request tonight is to clarify so that there is one clear definition of those terms within code, and the various sections that reflect those definitions, it will refer the reader to the relevant definition that staff is intending. Other sections to be amended is a typographical error in the minimum parcel area section, which is 10.4.2, subsection D. There's references to slope ranges that are inclusive, meaning there isn't a distinction between the categories of slope ranges, and the changes tonight would clearly define the various slope ranges, so there is no overlap. Staff is also proposing changes to code sections 10.3.1 and 10.3.6 as it relates to conditional use permits and variances. This code section change would involve adding language that would, in essence, when a project involves a conditional use permit or variance and also involves another entitlement, such as a general plan amendment, a zone change, or a tentative subdivision map, the way the code currently reads today is that the Planning Commission would be the decision-making body for a conditional use permit or a zone, for a variance, and the City Council would serve as the decision-making body for a subdivision map, zone change, general plan amendment. The code change tonight would clearly define and require that projects that involve those types of entitlements move forward as a group so that City Council would be the decision-making body on all entitlements. The Planning Commission would serve as the advisory body to City Council. Additional changes involve the newly defined Development Services Department. There are references throughout the City Code, numerous sections, which I won't go over each case, that involve references to the old term Community Development Department or the Community Development Director. The changes would involve the new title of our department, which is Development Services Department, or in some cases, references to the Development Services Director. Also, on a very similar note, there are references to public works functions that the engineering division still does and currently does for the city. As you are aware, public works has been more or less bisected from not all actions or functions of the Public Works Department that involve engineering division functions were retained by the Public Works Department. They are still handled by the engineering division, and the code changes tonight would reflect the distinction between those actions and functions that the engineering division would currently do, and change the text accordingly. There's also a typographical error in section 10.2.5, which I won't go into great detail, but it clearly, the intended language is to define a particular subsection, which wasn't clearly defined previously. Also, additionally, there are sections under 10.1.4, the definition of terms. Staff is proposing adding definitions for the terms transitional housing and supportive housing. This would be to be consistent with state statute and be in compliance with SB 2. That's the state statute that involved and required local cities and counties to amend their zoning ordinances to allow for transitional housing, supportive housing, and emergency shelters in zoning districts where similar housing types are already allowed. Finally, there are a couple sections to non-existing zoning classifications. The CG zone, or general commercial zone, or R/T zone, which is the tourist residential designation. Those designations have not existed since the early 1990s, and tonight's request would clearly eliminate those from the code section. The Planning Commission did hear staff's draft and request that's before you tonight on May 7th. They did have two amendments that are mentioned on page 3 of the staff report. Those amendments have been incorporated into the draft ordinance before you tonight. Staff concurs with those amended changes. In terms of the environmental review, this particular project has no possibility that the amendments to the zoning ordinance may have a significant effect on the environment. Therefore, the project is exempt from CEQA. In terms of costs, the cost of staff time to develop, prepare, and implement the zoning ordinance amendments will be absorbed into the Development Services Department existing budget. There will, however, be a minimal cost associated with codifying the amendment. Staff wants to supports the request tonight, and along with the Planning Commission's request to also approve the ordinance, staff recommends tonight that the City Council conduct a public hearing to receive public comment, and then to introduce the attached ordinance and waive the first reading. We'll also note that in a couple weeks' time, staff will return for the second reading, and if it's adopted at that second reading, the ordinance would go into effect 30 days from the approval date. Mr. Vice Mayor, that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Andrew. At this time, any questions from council members? Ms. Borelli?
Andrew, the transitional and supportive housing provisions and definitions, I
Yes.
don't know whether the question I'm going to ask even would come under this or not, but I do know that, I'm going to say a couple years ago, that there was a lot of concern about how many were here in town. And when we, and I think we got some information from the county, and I'm wondering if, are we allowed, I mean, are we allowed to have a maximum? In other words, what was happening is there were several within, you know, a certain area.
So it's a
and
concentration?
the neighbors were very upset about it. And so if we're legally allowed to place a number or something, would it come under this, or is that totally separate?
My understanding of the SB2 language is that if such a facility is 6 or fewer people who reside in that home, the city must treat it as a single-family residence. We can't distinguish it in any other fashion. If there are 7 or more, then under our code, we could consider it as a conditional use permit and therefore look at perhaps concentration, if that was the concern a few years ago, the concentration of the number of facilities in a proximity. There is a provision in city code that under the community care facilities, that if you have a facility within, I don't have the code in front of me, but there is a radius. And even if you have 6 or fewer, and there is a, using your words or my words, concentration of these facilities, there is a provision in the city code that would require the second unit or the second facility or third facility to go through a conditional use permit process. So I think your
So
concern.
that would be a way to protect. In other words,
It's
there
already
could
there.
be like 3 houses sitting side by side, and somebody could come in, you know, and put 6 people in each one, and there are 3 of them right there. And, you know,
The first one we'd have to let go, but the second or third,
second or third,
we,
then
we
you
could process a conditional use permit if it was so needed. Yeah,
if we're made aware of it.
yeah, that's true.
That's another problem.
That
too.
is another true. That is a true point. Because it's permitted as a use allowed by right, we would not necessarily have to be notified.
I know.
Yeah.
So how do we,
We don't.
so we have to wait until it happens and then go through all the rigmarole that we went through? Okay. That doesn't seem right. Okay.
But I guess to answer your question, there are existing provisions that would trigger conditional use permits for a concentration of that type of facility in a particular area.
Okay, thanks.
Any additional?
Yeah, no, I have a question. Is that only if it's being operated by the same group, or could a totally different person come and open one next door to an existing one, or is it only if they wanted to expand that it would trigger?
They would be treated as separate facilities if that's your question.
If
It could be the same person or a different person.
it doesn't matter if it's a different, okay.
Yeah, the trigger is the complaint. Carol? Okay, at this point, I'll open it up to the public, unless, yeah, I don't think anybody had a question of the attorney. At this point, I'll open it up to the public hearing on this change in recommended first reading of an ordinance regarding the text or corrections of the text for the zoning. Seeing nobody approaching the podium, I'll close the public hearing and entertain a motion at this point.
I'll make a recommendation that we follow the recommended action to conduct a public hearing to receive comment regarding the request, and 2, to introduce the attached ordinance and waive the first reading of the ordinance.
Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a first and a second. First by Borelli, second by Patton. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous. Thank you, Andrew. Item 11, discussion and action items. Adopt a resolutions that implements the previously authorized adjustments to wastewater rates based upon the California Consumer Price Index, all urban consumers, from April 2010 to April 2013, which is equivalent to a 6.34% rate increase effective August 16th, 2013, and continues all other provisions of the multi-year wastewater rate schedule. Resolution number 7750 in full force and effect. Mr. Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Mayor, members of the council. As a housekeeping item, there are copies of the report on the back table if anyone in the audience would like one. Can you hear me okay? No? Let's switch mics. How's that? Better? Okay. Tonight, staff is recommending a 6.34% increase in wastewater rates based on the annual change in the California Consumer Price Index for all urban consumers from April 2010 to April 2013. At median water consumption, the rate increase is equivalent to about a $12 increase each bi-monthly billing period, or about $6 per month for a single-family residential ratepayer. If approved, the adjusted rates would be used to calculate the November utility bills. The primary reason for the increase is to ensure the city has adequate cash flow in order to make the second $1.5 million payment on the 2006 state revolving loan fund that is due in September 2014. As a review, the City Council adopted Resolution 7750, mentioned earlier, which established new wastewater user rates on October 13, 2009, that were planned to become effective October 16, 2009 and June 16, 2010. The initial rate increase was implemented as authorized on October 16, 2009. However, the second rate increase that would have become effective June 16, 2010 was suspended by the City Council on May 25, 2010 due to the public sentiment and the negative impacts of the Great Recession. 2 years later, the second previously authorized increase was implemented by the City Council on June 12, 2012. Resolution 7750 also authorized adjustments to the wastewater rates based on the annual change in the CPI as of April of each year, beginning June 16, 2011. The previously authorized CPI adjustments commencing June 16, 2011 and annually thereafter were deferred. Due to the previous suspension of the second rate increase and CPI adjustments, the city cut both discretionary capital improvement and operating expenditures, including freezing unfilled positions, continuation of the 10% employee pay cut, reducing the level of contingency for unforeseen expenditures, it's a mouthful, and deferring important sewer line replacement projects. As you know, yeah, would you mind? Sorry about that. Right here.
All right, glad to jump in here. The city completed a major capital improvement project on the wastewater treatment plant in 2009, primarily financed with a $42.8 million state revolving fund loan. The first original loan payment was due in fiscal year 2010-11 and totaled $1,422,436. And I believe we made that payment. Due to the suspension of the second we did not make that payment? That was deferred. That talks about it right here. Due to the suspension of the second wastewater rate increase, ratepayer water conservation, which directly affected sewer user rate revenue, and payment delinquencies as a result of bankruptcies, job loss, home foreclosures, etc., it became apparent that the city would not have adequate cash flow to make the full debt service payment in fiscal year 10-11. Thanks, Carl. You think? You're still recovering. In response to this situation, city staff contacted the State Water Board and negotiated a modified loan payment schedule which lowered the payment amounts for the first 3 years of the loan. In order to afford the first full $1,528,000 payment in fiscal year 2013-14, the city began setting aside fund balance in a rate stabilization reserve beginning in fiscal years 2009-10, as shown on the second table on page 2 of the report. As you can see, staff forecasts the rate stabilization reserve will have a balance of $1.687 million by June 30th of this year, which is adequate in making the first full $1.5 million payment by September 1st. As of September 1st, 2014, the reserve is forecasted to fall short by $282,730 in making the second $1.5 million payment. In order to make up the $282,000 shortfall and begin restoring the reserve, it is necessary to implement the previously authorized adjustment to the wastewater rates based on the change in the CPI from April 2010 through April 2013 on the billing period beginning August 16th. Between April 2010 and April 2013, the California CPI increased by 6.34%. And the 6.34% rate adjustment would generate approximately $283,000 in fiscal year 2013-14, which is adequate in addressing the $283,000 reserve shortfall as of September 1st, 2014. The current and proposed rates are shown in the table on page 3 of the report. The rate increase requested tonight, was authorized by resolution number 7750, which was subject to Proposition 218 noticing. Proposition 218 notices were provided to ratepayers prior to the adoption of that resolution. That resolution was the subject of a public hearing that was held at a regularly scheduled City Council meeting on October 13th, 2009. As a result, the city is not required to provide new Prop 218 notices to ratepayers. It's important to note that the voter-approved Measure H add-on sales tax has afforded approximately $746,000 in water infrastructure projects and approximately $1,034,000 in sewer charge discounts since its inception. The Measure H Sales Tax Committee plans on evaluating the sewer rate discounts and making a recommendation to the City Council this fall. Again, the rate increase is equivalent to about a $12 increase each bi-monthly period, or about $6 per month for single-family residential ratepayers. The adjusted rates would be used to calculate the November utility bills. If the proposed rate adjustments are approved tonight, staff plans on circulating an informational notice with both the July and November utility bills. With that, staff recommends that the City Council adopt the adjusted wastewater rates as presented. And with that, Dave will answer any questions.
Thank you, Nate, and thank you, Michael Drubish, for the cough drop.
Council members have any question of Dave? If Dave I think Dave will be able to respond now. If not, we'll have Kim Nye to do it. I forgot to mention that she's sitting in for Captain Scott, so. Acting Chief Scott, sorry, like acting Mayor Hagan. Quite an actor, right? Go ahead.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hagan. Dave, when I looked at the rates and compared them, how is it that was it arbitrary where the restaurants were charged $302 per first 750 cubic feet, and yet a fast food restaurant is only $259?
Yeah.
Isn't 750 cubic feet still the same no matter who's using the water?
Yeah, the rates are based on a 2005 equity study that was done. So back in 2005, as part of your financing plan for the wastewater treatment plant, we did an equity study that looked at two things. One, the strength of the sewer and the flow, based on state standards. So the state issues indexes for each user, and they're general in nature. There isn't exact, for the type of restaurants say. There's different variations of restaurants, but in general, what strength does a restaurant have compared to, say, a bar or a church or a resident? And so when the council adopted the rates in 2005, those equity adjustments were incorporated. And it was also a way of, more accurately billing the ratepayer. And that was done for both the base charge and the commodity rate, the rate per over 750 cubic feet.
So you're saying that the 750 cubic feet that a restaurant uses somehow is different than the 750 cubic feet that the fairgrounds would use?
That's correct, because if you thought about the plant, if the city of Placerville, everybody shut down, nobody flushed a toilet.
Right.
There's a basic cost. In other words,
Right.
almost 50% of your sewer enterprise fund is just debt service. So that cost is spread across with base charge, just
Right.
at a basic level. And there's a basic level of staffing, basic level of utilities, so on and so forth. And so the purpose of the base charge is to capture those minimal costs on a proportional basis based on equity. So when they looked at the equity, they look at suspended solids, biological oxygen demand, things that engineers can understand and I can't. But that's how those differentiations between rates were developed. And if you'd like, I can provide the council a copy of the equity study that was done back then.
Well, my concern is that, and I apologize for picking on the restaurants, but I'm looking at this chart and going, restaurants, which, they're being charged the very most out of all of those categories. And there's a vast difference between fast food restaurants, which use a lot of grease, and maybe somebody who doesn't even have a grill. So
That would be a deli.
Pardon me?
Isn't there, I think there's a deli, don't we have a
We
deli?
came up,
rating?
yeah, the council approved back in, and that was one of the issues with the rate increase was equity between the various eateries.
Right.
For example, coffee shops. Some
Right.
coffee shops prepare food, but they don't grill, they don't fry, they don't do certain, they do minimal cooking. Most of it doesn't go in the sewer. And so the council, in good faith, created what we call the coffee shop rate, which is a hybrid between fast food and retail stores.
But then you look at, like a car wash that I assume washes greasy grime off of automobiles, that's its job, that's its business, and yet it
Yeah.
is an extremely low rate as compared to a restaurant.
And the reason for that is because car washes recycle their water, and they actually treat it themselves. And as the water becomes so dirty to a point, and again, the engineer can explain it better than I can, they haul it off.
So it doesn't go into our sewer system?
Some of it does, but not all of it.
But they capture a lot of the grease
They
and oil
filter
that
it.
goes into there.
Yeah, they
And
capture
haul
the
it off
grease.
that into their system.
And
They're required.
the reason why, for example, restaurants are so high is the fats, oils, and greases.
Is what?
Fats, oils, and greases that they tend to generate in general. Nate.
I'm sorry to jump in here, but you mentioned fast food, which you think would generate more grease. Actually, all food service establishments are required to not discharge fats, oils, and grease to the sewer collection system. It builds
Right.
up in the lines. So the assumption, if they don't have it in place already, but they should have grease interceptors in place. And the effluent from a restaurant is a higher strength, a higher biological oxygen demand because it has a lot of food waste in it from scraps from the dishwasher or in preparation. It ends up with a lot of food waste in the effluent. So
So why
that-
wouldn't fast foods and restaurants be the same if
They have-
if nobody's pouring out fats, oils, and grease?
Right. Fast food is more easily disposed of as solid waste. The waste that they generate in the paper wrappers, and less of it goes down through a dishwasher or a food grinder. And the studies show that the waste coming from a restaurant is higher strength than these other categories.
Well, okay.
Thank you, Nate. And one thing I'd like to point out is that there are a lot of variations of restaurant. There's a lot of variations of fast food. Not all of them are the same. And this is based on state standards. So the state has determined, based on some science, what level of effect they have on our sewer system. And the purpose of these rates is to make and to ensure that we're equitably, not perfectly, no rate structure is completely perfect, but to equitably allocate costs to the ratepayer.
Has there been any resistance at maybe a development level for our rates, so it might cost us a new restaurant coming to town because our rates are so high? Has that been?
I'm not aware of that being an issue.
I can try and answer. I would say, not that I'm aware of as far as new development, but I know there have been some concerns raised to me from existing restaurants as far as being able to pay the rates, yeah.
Right.
In restaurants that have left.
And restaurant-
Possibly,
that have
that's
gone up.
possibly part of the reason, yeah.
But restaurants have opened up in their place, so.
Right, I know that there's the ebb and flow always,
Yeah.
but it just, I mean, to me, it's glaring that is just so high compared to some of the other categories, and I don't want to, I mean, it's to me, 750 cubic feet is 750 cubic feet, no matter who's generating it, but what I'm hearing is, well, it is different, that the biological
absolutely.
components are different, and
Yeah.
so,
Yeah. And then the other thing we've encouraged is the separation of landscape irrigation from public use water, if you will, or water used just in the restaurant, so that they aren't paying for sewer charges on that commodity they're using for irrigation, outdoor use.
So, I mean, also, when you look at the discount, the Measure H discounts, it's kind of the same thing. It's like restaurants get the least of the money. And it seems to me that, why isn't, I mean, I guess you're doing it the same, you're charging the same ratio as you're discounting it at the same. So the people who get charged the most get the least amount of discount.
Actually, when you look at the proportionally, generally speaking, non-residential ratepayers are receiving a pretty good discount. And I can tell you that the committee, the Measure H committee, spent a lot of time looking at the formula. This is based on a formula. And what they did is they looked at the proportional revenue that each category generates on average, and then took the available money that's available through Measure H, leaving some set aside for capital replacement, rounding to the nearest $5. You'll notice they're all, that way. And the committee, I can tell you, our last committee meeting, there was discussion about re-evaluating the discounts because rates have gone up. They've gone up once already, and if they're approved tonight, they would go up again. And is the discounts, is it where they should be, or do we leave them alone? Those are some discussions they want to have. Matter of fact, they have a meeting this Thursday to discuss that, or to at least, actually not to discuss the discounts, but to discuss next year's appropriation. The discussion for the discounts will actually be this fall, but it'll be before this rate increase occurs. So their hopes to have a recommendation for you prior to November, when these rates would actually hit the utility bill.
Ms. Pirelli.
I was wondering if we, since the council has to approve this, if it might be possible that we could have some sort of report from the committee so that we would maybe better understand this. Because I'm looking at a lot of these things too and wondering why. Then as I know the public, and they would ask us, and I remember when all this was going on, but now it's really, we've been into this for a while, and I'm just thinking that maybe it would behoove all of us to have some sort of better explanation.
What I can do is circulate the report, the equity report that was adopted in 2005, and some other information, and we can also come back with a report kind of explaining the report, why certain things were done, and the changes that occurred after that.
Yeah, because my question was why are we giving the hospital such a large, huge discount?
Again, their bills are huge, and so proportionally, again.
Oh, I see. Okay, so.
Yeah.
It's a dollar discount.
The committee, what they did is they looked at how much revenue is each rate category generating in aggregate. So all restaurants, for example, they were categorized separately, all fast food, all the hospital, and the hospital has several facilities, as you know, car washes, so on and so forth, single-family residential, and they came up with an average, okay, per billing period. And then they multiplied that by the amount of money that they want to set aside, what they felt comfortable in setting aside from the annual Measure H revenues. And they came up with a number. Then they rounded it to the nearest $5. So that's how this came about. And it might be, I would suggest perhaps give the committee a chance to review the discount and to come back to the council. I mean, we could do a preliminary report if you'd like, or, a complete recommendation after they've reviewed the discount. But our goal is to bring a recommendation to the council before November, most likely early October.
Teresa? Tricia, sorry.
Would the rest of the council?
I just have a couple of comments. One is I know we've studied these things and we have foregone the rate increases that were approved in 2010. And my concern is that we don't wait forever. So timing-wise, for this council to take action and notice the public and include it in our bill so that in the November bills and do our readings, what would be the time frame that we could go backwards to and have this approved? Because I know it's key that the sooner we approve this,
Right.
the less the increase has to be. If we wait until after November, we're going to have to go more than 6.34, whatever that percent number is. And I don't want to get in that situation. I want to
Right.
get on with it. And I know that
Yeah.
the Measure H committee has made the adjustments, and I understand what you're saying, their volume based upon usage by category so that it spreads out fairly across the board.
Right.
And I do know that the rate mods that we use per strength, if you will, or per type of business in general, has to do with an engineering study that's been done by the State Engineers Society that has put together this table, and that was used by our consultants when we did these rates
Right.
and the classifications. So
Right.
this is not, it's not, Dave didn't just make this up, and we didn't do it in the finance department, we didn't do it in the engineering department. It was
No, and I
comparisons of
understand that.
several others, so as far as that is. But, so my question is then, timing.
Timing is sensitive. This rate increase is proposed to affect the November bill, which is actually the billing period that starts on August 15th.
Yes.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Driscoll, we need 60 days from approval to implementation. We need a 60-day period. So that backs up to no later than
June 15th.
Right, which would be the first meeting in June. And I can tell you that I don't think the committee would be ready, even if we tried to do it in 2 weeks, I don't think they'd be ready. There's a lot of information in order to refresh the information we use for the discount. It would take longer than that just to prepare.
Okay, so in layman's terms, is what I understand, we need to pass the rate increase because of the 60-day qualification to get it on the billing cycle.
Right.
However, the Measure H discount could be approved as late as the end of October.
Correct.
And still not because the printed bills and the discount is not a rate, so it's not a filed rate.
That's correct.
So, again, I think our questions that can come back on Measure H rates and variations, and I think that's what we've charged that committee to do, is actually make that recommendation. We know what the existing discounts are. We have to trust that they are going to do the studying and end up with the proper discounts based upon what's available and how much we want to put forward for capital improvements. In other words,
And I do trust them, and I would absolutely vote for this tonight because I know it's something we have to do. But there are questions, people are questioning, and I think, we would like to be able to say, like
Right.
Carol,
And
answer.
Oh,
okay. Ms. Pat?
Yeah, I have, if I could be so bold as to request, what I'd like to know is, does a restaurant on Missouri Flat Road pay the same water rate as a restaurant on Main Street? Quite
Water-
frankly, water sewer rates.
Well, first of
No.
all, you have to,
Okay, I know
Yeah,
it's different jurisdictions, but it is something that people ask all the time. They say,
Yeah.
why is it so expensive in the city when I could go across the bridge and my rate is different?
The
well, actually,
water,
Placerville Drive.
yeah, the water on most of Broadway, most of Placerville Drive is EID. So it's my understanding that the water rates would be the same as an EID customer on Missouri Flat, say. That's my understanding. And we can verify that if you like. The sewer rates, because we only treat sewer within the city limits, would not be the same.
So that's what, I really would like to know
Yeah.
the disparity, and I'd like to know
Yeah.
Main Street as well.
I'd like to make one point in that, and again, Mr. Driscoll, correct me if I'm wrong. If you make any changes within your rate structure, that's a Proposition 218 item. So you would have to go back to your ratepayers, I believe, if you were to reallocate cost.
But I mean, you could see, you see
Just-
where I'm
just so
going,
you
though.
know.
And I think that what Vice Mayor Hagan said about the
Yeah.
discount, I think is
Yeah. Now, the discount
without
would,
changing
because
the rates.
you're providing,
an incentive, if you will.
yeah.
Or,
So that's something
a
that
thank you.
we can adjust and not require too much, wouldn't require any noticing.
Mr. Driscoll, did you have a comment on the 218?
Well, what Dave said is right. If you change the rates around to increase any one category, you're going to get back into a 218. And if you decrease something, you're going to have to increase something else to make it balance. So what Dave said is exactly correct.
I was just going to mention too, if you would like, we can provide those rate comparisons to you. I think that's what you were looking for, Councilmember
Yeah,
Patton.
and I think that, again, I think again, they're public records, the water rate and for EID and the sewer rate for EID and the sewer rate and the water rate for Placerville. Again, the jurisdictions overlap. And, my office building, for instance, is on Placerville Drive. We have EID water, we have city sewer. So I get two bills, sometimes monthly.
But the sewer bill, because I'm in the same category,
Yeah.
is based on the water usage.
Right.
So they find that out from EID.
Right, EID provides that usage information to us, so. But the water bill rates are very similar. Okay, at this time, I'll open it up to the public for questions. Oops. Go ahead.
Good evening. Michael Drubish again.
Just a test.
Mr. Hagan, you mentioned that the city has forgone the rate increases since 2010. But correct me if I'm wrong, that this action before you tonight is it not collecting all of those rate increases based off the CPI that would have gone into effect, and they will now go into effect in August? So the only difference is we're still paying, it's like all the increases went into effect in August. The only thing is the city's missed out on that revenue between when it was suspended and August of this year. And then I had the questions on the subsidization too, and interesting that the state yet again is telling us how to do our business. I was really surprised to see that it looks like Measure H has brought in $1.78 million since it was raised, a quarter-cent sales tax. Is that correct?
I'll have Dave answer that in a minute.
That is correct.
And
And
that's
the-
over a 3-year period, right?
That's cumulative. That's
Cumulative over
in
the
aggregate.
3 years.
Wow.
And we're using it for some, we have some capital projects going on.
Yeah, it looks like,
And there's some substantial refunds that went back out.
yeah, $750,000 in infrastructure and over $1 million in refunds, basically. And then that 50% of the sewer enterprise fund is debt service. That was interesting. refresh my memories, Measure H have a sunset to it? That's all, thank you.
Measure H has a 30-year sunset.
Okay. And there was another question. Oh, we have another question here, but I was going to answer the other one. But go ahead. State your name for the record, please, sir.
Oh, Richard Evans, thank you for your time. A couple of questions. When it says single family, is that any single family? Does it distinguish between an apartment, a house? How's that figured out?
Well, I think I can answer that because single family is single family. Lifeline is for Lifeline, as it says. Some people qualify for Lifeline rates, the same as PG&E rates. And apartment units, it's per unit, or I'm sorry, it's not per unit, it's per building, Dave, on the apartment units?
Apartments are in aggregate, so
Okay.
it's that would be for a duplex or larger.
Okay. And did you have any other questions?
Well, no, I was just concerned because I look around in a lot of areas and people are just letting their yards go to hell. They're turning brown, their weeds are growing, and indirectly that affects the revenue to the city. And partly because of the fact that people aren't buying plants, they're not going to Home Depot as much, they're not spending the money. When they sell them, they may not be getting the price, a little better price if they kept it up. Pride of ownership goes down, and then the next thing you see is problems in the area. So it's just, there's a relationship to that, and I see where they give your base charge, and I wondered when was the last time that base charge was ever raised to allow for giving you a little more water at the base rate to take care of your yard, and if you've got drip systems and you're conservative, because I found in the past where I came from, they used to charge the rate, they figured the sewer rate based on your consumption.
So
And it didn't matter if you if you took the water in, but it wasn't going in the sewer, they still felt your consumption. We lost 7-Up because of that, because they said, well, you're taking all this water in, so your sewer's this bill. Well,
Okay.
it was going into the soft drinks. It wasn't going into the sewer. So that was kind of my concern, that when you get to a point and something to think about that we ran into, and it was a serious problem, as people cut back, and they will, and don't use as much water, it doesn't move through the pipes, and they started drying up, clogging, and then we had a serious problem of maintenance and sewer problems because it just wasn't moving through the line, so it was almost like we had to come back and encourage people to use a little more water. So it's something that could happen, and I really kind of just look around and I see that people are they're letting their properties go.
Okay.
Thank you.
We can answer those questions if you'll have a seat.
Okay.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing at this time, and we'll answer those questions.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. The question about the base charge, in 2009, when the City Council adopted the rate increase, Resolution 7750, they made a change to your rate structure due to a heightened sensitivity. We were in the middle of the recession. There was a real concern for those that are on fixed incomes, lower income, that affording these rates. And so what the council did is there was a lot of analysis, a lot of a discussion. Before that rate increase, the base charge was based on 1,000 cubic feet. And in an effort to minimize the impact to those that use very little water, that tend to be on fixed incomes or low income, the council reduced the base charge from 1,000 cubic feet credit to 750. And what that did is it lowered the bill for those in the lower consumption band, if you will. And it worked. And I think it's appreciated from what I've heard. Initially, those that it affected, it was appreciated. But that was a major change that was done because of the rate increase and affordability.
Right. Okay. And I'm going to answer your other question, or attempt to. what you're looking at is wastewater rates, okay? Residential wastewater rates are based upon your winter consumption. So, in theory, in the months of November, December, and January, you're not watering your lawn. So, there is no additional charge to wastewater, these are the rates we're talking about tonight, for higher consumption in the summer. You will pay for the water you consume, but it does not affect your wastewater rates. So the way you maintain that, and there's no excuse to let your lawns go dead in the summer if you're concerned about wastewater rates because they don't affect. They're the same throughout the year. We read them one time, we use that as the average for the year. And in fact, if you use more water than that, you can also, and businesses, many businesses have changed, they can set up a separate landscape meter, which does not affect their wastewater rates. So if you owned a shopping center, for instance, or a restaurant, and you had a lot of landscaping outside, you would have a secondary landscape meter that would just run your water for landscaping and does not affect our wastewater treatment system. So I hope that answers your questions. We thought about this, and this was an item that was brought up substantially in 7 and 9, in that time period, 2007, 2009. We went through these hearings and these studies so that we could make sure that people were treated fairly, if you will. So,
One question, I apologize.
yes, go ahead.
Richard Evans mentioned something about, or maybe it was Michael Drobich, about the amount of money for the debt service. So we borrowed $42 million. Then what happens when that's paid off? In theory, 27, 28 years. We have to do a new treatment plant.
Yeah,
by
that's
then?
a great question.
Hopefully it lasts that long.
and the scary thing is that we built this new plant. You can basically drink the effluent from it. I don't recommend that, but Nate says it's possible.
Nate said it's pretty good, right?
But we're leery. Every 5 years our NPDES permit is renewed, and every year they up the ante as far as regulations. And so your plant that's compliant today may not be compliant in 10 years. We don't know that, but that is a fear we have because the regulations have exponentially risen over the last several years. The other thing, you have the effect of inflation. Everything's gone up. Mm-hmm. You know, the plant requires chemicals. It requires electricity, a lot of electricity, to the tune of $360,000 a year. Chemicals in probably in the, roughly in the hundreds of thousands anyway. And those chemicals, a lot of them are petroleum-based, which everything petroleum's going up. So between the regulations and increased operating costs, I think there's going to be additional costs that we'll have that will offset the debt service, and then some.
Dave, I wanted to ask you a question. I know we talked about this before. What happened to the study about putting in solar out there to generate electricity?
Yeah, about, I want to say 2 or 3 years ago, we looked at it conceptually. Because of the limited footprint, it didn't look like it would pencil out. There's been a couple consultants that have approached us recently that are interested in looking at that. The panels have improved. They're more efficient. It takes less square footage of panel to generate the same level of electricity. And so we're looking at that, but it is in the infant stages at this point.
Any additional questions? Well, at this point, I'd entertain a motion to adopt the resolution, or?
I'll make a motion that we adopt a resolution that implements the previously authorized adjustments in wastewater rates based on the change in the California Consumer Price Index. All urban consumers from April 2010 to April 2013, which is equivalent to a 6.34% rate increase effective August 16th, 2013, and continues all other provisions of the multi-year wastewater rate schedule, resolution number 7750, in full force and effect.
Your motion.
I would entertain a second if you would also add for the discount to come back after from the Measure H committee to maybe be reviewed. I would entertain a second, but I don't want to vote for the rate increase without reviewing the discount.
So is that okay with
Is
motion
that
maker?
okay?
Patty?
It's okay with me, yeah,
Okay.
but I wanted to make sure it was okay with, that we're not messing up any dates or anything.
Okay,
Could you
we have
repeat-
a motion and a
Dave-
second.
Dave has-
Oh, I'm sorry. Could
Yeah.
you repeat the motion? Just, I didn't hear the whole.
Well, it's
Carol?
your motion along
motion.
with,
Yeah.
With the Measure H committee to come back after reviewing the discount,
Yeah.
so that we could maybe apply different discount to the November billing.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I'll amend my motion to
you.
include that.
And I'll second the motion.
okay. The motion's been made and seconded. Yeah, but,
Councilmember Borelli?
Aye.
Vice Mayor Hagan?
aye.
Councilmember Patton?
Aye.
Councilmember Wilkins?
It's been carried by unanimous vote. 11.2 is the next discussion item. That'd be the status report. Mr. Strawn?
Thank you, Vice Mayor Hagan, members of the council. Richard Evans is here in the audience tonight. He lives on Dina Court in the Deer Crossing subdivision off of Cumbelic Road near State Route 49 and Cumbelic Road, James Drive, that area. He's been seeing his cul-de-sac pavement condition deteriorate in a subdivision that's 23 years old or so, and has expressed concern with the engineering division and city manager about, and the council, I believe, has received communications about the poor condition of the pavement and some other issues, apparent high water pressure and lack of sidewalks in the area. So I put together a staff report, and I won't go through the whole thing in detail, but I'll hit some of the key points. With regard to the pavement condition, we did see, it was just last year, a nearby cul-de-sac, Deborah Court, completely fell apart. There were chunks of asphalt standing vertical and heaved into piles, and we responded to that on an emergency contract basis and repaved basically the perimeter of the cul-de-sac where you would expect, perhaps a car turning around or a garbage truck servicing the cul-de-sac to be traveling. So that was done, and the condition of Dina Court was at that time also raised by Mr. Evans, and we looked at it. We saw alligatoring, pretty average condition of pavement for Placerville, which has a number of streets in poor condition, and at that time it didn't rise to the level of priority or needing emergency repair or of that nature. However, it has deteriorated further, and we did, Steve Ewell and Public Works went out with their own forces and cut out a couple of the alligatored sections and patch paved. So I think that addresses the immediate concern. It still presents, while they were doing that, what they discovered was that there was no aggregate base material in the street. It's 2 inches of asphalt on a clayey soil type material. So it needs further investigation. But as my report goes into our funding and our limited supply of maintenance dollars, and we have to take the approach of a wait and see on that street. There are a number of other highly traveled roads in the city that are of poor condition. Pacific, Canal Street, Main Street right downtown. Ray Lawyer Drive is beginning to fall apart. And at our current funding revenue level for our street maintenance, those projects I just mentioned would consume over 4 years of our funding stream. So unfortunately, there's nothing available for immediate attention other than our own forces doing the work on a piecemeal basis as emergencies may arise. I should also mention that we have a capital project on Cumbelic Road to widen that road, and it was found through looking at the old plans that pavement section was also reduced. And I don't know if you've been out there, that road is falling apart prematurely as well, and there'll be a request in the plans that we're putting together include a full overlay of the road and widening. Initially, it was thought we could just widen, but the road has deteriorated since we received the bicycle funding allotment, and we'll be asking for some of our maintenance dollars to address that issue as well. So throughout the neighborhood there, and the area, there appears to be some cost-saving measures that were done back in the day to those roads that were constructed. I will say that cul-de-sacs are, potentially, our current city standard for cul-de-sacs is a smaller street section, pavement section, the amount of asphalt over aggregate base, and that's due to the fewer car trips. But what we are seeing is potential for heavy garbage trucks to, each garbage truck would be the equivalent of 3,000 vehicles. So every week you get that coming through, and the turning of the vehicle imparts a force that's not altogether downward, and it stresses the pavement. So that said, the city standard for cul-de-sacs will get another look by the engineering division and see if that be brought up to a higher standard, such as a local street. So we'll be looking at that in the near future. With regard to water pressure, the neighborhood is operating at the city water mains provide 140 pounds per square inch PSI of water pressure, and that's not uncommon for the city. The downtown district is 150 to 160 pounds. It's on the higher side of average for the city, I would say. The issue that was raised by Mr. Evans was that the pressure regulators on the customer side of the meter were failing and letting all that 140 pounds through into the home, causing damage to pipes and flooding and things of that nature. So it's not something that we will be adjusting as far as bringing the pressure down. Not high pressure, but adequate pressure, and the size of the water mains are important for providing fire flow. And it's, like I said, an average pressure to be providing on the city side. That pressure is the same pressure as in the EID system, which serves State Route 49 and areas to the north and outside the city limits. This actually goes back to a pavement discussion. There are two boxes in the center of the cul-de-sac that are showing that settlement, signs of being depressed. I think that photograph on the front page of the newspaper, you got a straight edge going across that box. That's one of them. One houses a sewer cleanout, which is not, doesn't have any water pressure behind it, and the other is a water blow off, so that it's a dead end line, it's good practice to flush out a dead end line and remove any settling debris, accumulation of deposits. So we looked at inside both boxes. There's no evidence of leaking. I think that was one of the potential causes that Mr. Evans thought was that the water main was leaking and saturating the subbase and causing the pavement to settle. What I'm seeing throughout the subdivision is anytime a structure was put in the road, the area around the concrete box is settling. The manholes especially are showing that, and they're deeper than the water facilities. What happens is you have to excavate the whole depth of the manhole and then place the base, the rings of the manhole, and then bring the material back up compacted to 95%, or properly compact that material. I suspect that that material was not properly compacted as they constructed those roads. The depressed pavement area I don't see as an immediate hazard. It doesn't present a trip hazard. It doesn't look like an immediate cause for concern. With regard to the sidewalks, I did some research on the approvals for the subdivision, and long story short, there was a traffic safety committee memo that recommended to omit or remove the condition to construct sidewalks from Carla Drive, and that is an encroachment onto State Route 49 with a gate, so it's the fire access to the subdivision, from that street to Cumbelic Road. And the reasoning given was that pedestrians would access the subdivision through Carla. They could walk by the gate, as they went south on 49 or back into the subdivision. They would go that way rather than go all the way up to Cumbelic and then loop around on James. In addition, during the condition of approval stage for that subdivision, There was also discussion with Caltrans, who was widening 49 and realigning it in places that they provide basically rough grade the shoulder to allow for these sidewalks. Caltrans ran into a snag with an EID water main and could not widen the shoulder to sidewalk grade, and that presented a high cost to the developer, and the condition was recommended by the Traffic Safety Committee to be waived, and it was adopted by the Planning Commission at its October 2nd, 1990 meeting. So that's the result of my research on what happened to the sidewalks, and it concludes my report as well. So any questions on Dina Court?
No. Does any member of the council have questions?
So when this was put in, you're saying that there's no aggregate under the
According to our Public Works Superintendent,
asphalt, yeah.
right, there's no aggregate
so
base.
that was not required, or was that something that just kind of slipped by the inspector?
At least in those two locations where they dug, it looks like it slipped by. It was a requirement on the subdivision to construct the roads to city standards, which would have been 2 inches of asphalt over 4 inches of aggregate base.
Any other council member have a question? Staff? Seeing none, I'll bring it to the public hearing, and I see Mr. Evans is there.
Thank you again, Richard Evans. I'd like to say one thing right off from the beginning. Your staff has been fantastic. Alan came out, made sure and got a hold of me when they did the meter test. He came out and got a hold of me when they talked about the really bad areas that need to be repaired. Nate's provided me any information I've needed. I mean, it's really a pleasure to work with a department that wants to give you that information. Okay, as it was pointed out that there's no aggregate, I know there's a statute of limitations, but you paid for aggregate, because I've got the invoice here.
Excuse me. I believe that the developer paid for the aggregate. I'm not sure that the city did, but the city doesn't build the roads. The developer builds the roads. Yeah. So two specs, I think, but is that correct, Nate?
Correct. The developer would construct the roads. The city accepts them at completion.
I just saw where it was signed off by somebody for payment. So they got paid for it regardless of where it came from and didn't do it. Also, I noticed on James when they came out and did some repairs, there was no aggregate down there. It just looked like clay. And we can't go back and fix the past, but the thing is, it's a developer here in town, a big developer, and I'd be real interested in knowing how when I read all the soils reports that were siltation, poor drainage, the soil reports were horrible, and I can't even imagine a developer going, we don't need any ABS, we'll just put asphalt over mud and do it. So it's something that you may want to look into, because I plan to ask for a moratorium on this developer if he starts doing more projects until we get some answers that how did this happen? I mean, we're talking 20 years, but we still had computers and a lot of things. But my concern when I was reading the report, just a couple things, that the traffic committee recommended, and I thought that was kind of strange, go walk through the subdivision, then walk back out on the highway. And usually you don't direct outside people through a subdivision and then back out on the highway. And in the memorandum that's in your packet, it talks at the bottom, walkway to be constructed from Moulton Drive to Carla Drive, and then why they didn't. But then in your planning commission meetings, it says install asphalt walkways from Moulton Drive to Carla Drive. No walkways will be required from Carla Drive to Cumberland Road along Highway 49. However, the possibility of a footpath or some type should be considered within the landscape plan. I spent hours on that file. I didn't see a landscape plan, and I couldn't understand how you could do a development like that. No landscape plan. I don't see any path from this street to the other street. So that wasn't done. All you've got is shoulder with a white line and some ABS, not ABS, but like aggregate compressed. But there's no, I went out today again, there's no asphalt walkway from that street to there, so that wasn't done. And I don't know where the landscape comes in, because that's a recovery zone, and according to Caltrans, the lady I talked to at Caltrans, who was Marilyn Sangers, she said all this should be in the file, because they had to talk to Caltrans. If they had put a path through there, or if they'd put landscape, it's a recovery zone, so there has to be 15 feet of recovery for a vehicle. So I'm getting this directly from Caltrans, and I'm going, so they're talking back here, back then, of a landscape plan, a pathway, and a lot was missed. And my main concern is our street might last another 10 or 20 years. Who knows? It might fall apart. They did fix the really bad areas. I appreciate it. I said it way back when I started sending emails. Does anybody go check the scales, the weight of the garbage trucks? Because I did a quick calculation on when they start and how much they pick up by generated by each household. And it's kind of like it could be overweighted. And they do have to log in and out when they go into weigh and dump at the transfer station. So I had asked the city a year ago, check their scales, see if they're overloading their trucks, because the trucks did some serious damage. And to have them twice a week instead of once a week created the problem. But like I say, there's still I'm real happy, not here to bug you. There should be some sealing or some big cracks that they're going to look at. But it disturbs me, the more I look into this, I find that there's more stuff that wasn't done. And I knew from the beginning it wasn't groundwater penetration or whatever they tried to say it was, that there was no ABS underneath the street. And, you know, you pay for that when you buy a house in that subdivision. You pay high taxes, and I don't hold the city responsible for it, but something fell through the cracks. And we got a big developer in town that even knows better. I mean, basic things you don't do, and to do it and get it signed off is something that you have to say, maybe we need to look into some of the other files. And I guarantee you, if you don't have time, I do, and I'll start looking into them. But I'd really ask, I would think you'd want to go to them and ask them some questions. You got paid for this, why didn't you do it? You got paid for this, where is it? You got paid for this, what happened to it? And all that can do is better Placerville. This is my home, been here 12 years, I love it. And I want to see it maintained, not just fall apart and go downhill. So I do appreciate everything they've done. My neighbor doesn't have to get in the car and drive to his mailbox. He can walk, barely. And there are going to be additional problems, and we'll
sorry,
do.
Does your neighbor have a walking problem, or is it?
Yeah, he has a very serious, and he used to get in his car because two of the bad spots were in front of his house, and they fixed those two. Those were the worst, and they would have got worse because the truck just keeps pushing the pavement up. But garbage company told me they got a new truck, but I still see the old truck coming in there, and when it comes in, it's a monster. But you might want to just give them a call and say, let's see your records and see what kind of weight load you got going in every day. It wouldn't hurt, because James Street is the same exact as our cul-de-sac. And then when you look at the review, I noticed they're going to relook at the thickness and ABS and all that. It really needs to be thicker even on the main streets, because they've proved in Europe if they do more compaction ABS down below, they have less repairs on their streets per 20 years, 30 years, because if the base is better, the asphalt holds up better. So maybe you just got to start and work your way that way. But I do appreciate everybody coming out. I do appreciate the response. The one man that's not here anymore was very, very polite, very nice, made me aware that he was going to be leaving, but gave me his word that he would follow through, and I would get a report and answers. And so you guys, you did good, and hopefully you can get some more answers just for you, because you're going to use this developer, and he needs to answer what happened.
I was going to tell you the developers died, so I think you may have something.
You don't use Vicini?
I'm sorry, he's not a developer.
Oh, well, what is he?
He's a contractor.
Okay, well, sorry then, I got it wrong, but yeah. I would just think they would have some
I don't know
answers
what
for
the
you.
developer paid for and what he got. That's
okay.
The developer's problem, probably. Anyway, any other comments, concerns?
You know what, I'm going to just say this. It's just an unfortunate thing, and I think we've had, you know, if we look back and even had Mr. Evans go through all the files, I think we would find a lot of this stuff went on. And, you know, people get really upset with the city, and they say that we make business impossible, and we're all these hybrid. But you know what? It's just things like this that have forced our hand and forced our staff to make these decisions that we have to, you know, and it's sad, but that's exactly what's happened is, you know, and I'm sorry for you because it happened so long ago that we have no recourse, and unfortunately the economic times have, you know, made it so that we don't have a lot of money to do this. And as Nate pointed out, we've just got so many roads that are just in such disrepair, and there's just no money, and we just have to, you know, go along and do the best we can. And hopefully the economy is going to improve and we will get some more money.
Yes.
Nate, I really appreciated the information in the packet. I just want to go on record as saying that. And this PCI report, I know it was from 2007, but what a wealth of information. But the thing that caused me concern is the rankings are only A and B. Is that, I mean, we obviously have roads that are worse than, I mean, there's so many of them, and to only give an A and a B, I mean, is that, do you want to be high or low in a PCI? Excuse me.
High is good.
High is good. So the lower the PCI number, so how would you prioritize, I guess that's what I'm asking. How do you prioritize a report like this? Because I looked at the ranking and went, oh, look, we have all A's. Oh, well, we have some B's too, but we don't have any C, D, E, or F's.
You know, it's funny, I never look at that column. I wonder if those are arterial, like major roads and minor roads.
I don't know,
I know it has rank, but I'm trying to look at, you know, Cold Springs is pretty major, Locust is minor. I tell you the truth, I don't look at those.
I was going to say,
What I do,
the ranking must be the activity on the road, because Placerville Drive all the way down is an A, and I know that's not an A, right?
No way.
On
I
PCI,
think it's
it
just
wouldn't be.
a
but
poor, like ranking, like Carl's saying, in traffic
with traffic.
counts.
Okay, so traffic count determines
And that's
the
one of
ranking.
the factors in establishing a priority is
Right.
traffic counts and pavement condition. So I use the numerical PCI to get close, and then, you know,
So the
which of the
numerical
roads.
PCI is what they used on these graphs in the report, the numerical PCI.
Yeah, and in the graphs, and I refer to the tables mostly for,
Both tables, yeah.
yeah.
Well, it really is an interesting, I mean, I'm sorry that's from 2007, but I'm sure it's still relevant. I mean, I'm guessing it's
It is.
fairly accurate, even though it's all this
Yeah,
many
that-
years later.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that we are in the process of applying for or working on an update on the pavement
Yes,
management
it's in
system.
the draft budget for next fiscal year
Correct.
to update
I
this
think,
report.
I thought I remembered something in the budget
Yeah.
hearing about this
Yeah.
pavement, and this is the actual report.
And from FHWA's perspective and Caltrans, we're expected to have this report updated no less frequently than every 3 years. So we're a little behind, but getting this updated again would,
We're behind on a lot of things. That's another story. All right, so items pulled from consent calendar was none. City manager reports, staff reports,
I don't believe we have anything further on the staff reports.
okay. Upcoming items, and I'm
I'd
going to go
like
back up
on
to
the-
item 12. but
Yeah,
I'll go back up there in a
Yeah,
second.
okay.
Upcoming, is there, as long as I'm there?
You have those listed there, the couple items, the Goldbug Park deck replacement. This is an item that we are working on right now. It's in poor repair, and we want to replace that, so we're working on that. The contract changes orders, some further ones for Western Placerville interchange. I believe we referred to those at your last meeting when we had some change orders. These are,
Yes.
hopefully will be good news change orders. How's that?
Yep.
Yes.
And then we have Nate referred to the Cumbelic Road widening project that we're going to bring back to you, and then the park ordinance that you have been waiting for. We hope to have that for you at your next meeting. And Dave just
And
reminded me
also-
also, very important item, the budget adoption will be at this meeting also.
Okay. So
And
now
one
I'm
more-
going to back
sorry,
up to item.
one more item,
Nate.
award of a construction contract for Thompson Way
Oh,
sidewalks.
thank you, Nate.
We
Okay,
got the bids on that, and they're within budget, so.
When's it close? or it closed?
It already
It closed.
closed.
We have the bid results.
Good.
And we'll bring the award next meeting.
Thank you. And under item 12, which I missed, council reports, I'll start with Tricia.
What was it? Saturday, we all went to Mayor Thomas's wedding, and she was so pretty, and everything was just so nice. And she's not here to hear me say it, but it was a wonderful wedding.
I'm sure she's watching it.
Yeah, I'm sure she's streaming this.
Streaming live. Dennis, I know, had to bring the computer.
Make sure that Carl's doing a good job.
Yeah. Ms. Patton.
Well, I attended the,
Oh,
I'm sorry. I thought you said Miss Pat.
I said Patton.
Go
That'd be
ahead.
the one next to you.
Go ahead, Miss Patton.
I'm sorry.
Thank you so much. Yes, the wedding was lovely. Both the bride and the groom were extremely handsome and beautiful, and it took my breath
crying.
away, and crying. But I wanted to just give thanks today in honor of all of our veterans. We celebrated Memorial Day this weekend, and there was a couple of, there was some tragedy, but I think right now it's important for us to remember the people who have given up everything, their lives included, for this country, the people who serve today, and the people who have come home from every war that we have ever fought. And I appreciate our veterans, and I just wanted to just say that publicly.
Thank you.
Ms. Borelli.
Thank you. Sorry. I attended the grand opening at Eschaton, the cottages at Eschaton Village, and they have just done a beautiful job. They had a lovely reception. Cleve was there and Carl, and they had open house, and I would encourage anyone that hasn't driven up there to go up and take a look at it, because that development is just expanding all the time, and they're just doing a really nice job. Then I attended the CDAC meeting, attended the Wakamatsu Festival, and then I also went to SEDCOR. They had the Gold Country Broadband Consortium meeting, and I wanted to bring it to the attention of the folks. I think they were a little disappointed that they're receiving so much so many calls and stuff of people wanting the broadband, wanting to upgrade their IT systems and stuff, and yet it really wasn't as well attended as it should have been. They need names, they need input in order to push this, and so I'm going to see if we can't, they have a link, and I'm going to see if we can't put it on our city information and provide that. And folks, one thing that they did have, they have, it's called a broadband speed test request. And it asks that, it says, please email or mail the following information on your internet service for our broadband demand maps. And so I'll provide all this, and maybe more people that are interested in it can participate because they really would like your input. And also attended a conference, telephone conference for a resume review to find our new director for SEDCOR. And that's it.
Okay. I attended the SACOG meeting, Eschaton opening, the Wakamatsu Festival, along with, we had some guests from Japan, from our sister city, Warabi, which is, Wakamatsu's in the northern part, Warabi's near Tokyo. Memorial Day proclamation, I was there to read it for the city, as I have for several years. I get that honor because I'm a veteran, or have in the past because I'm a veteran. And I really appreciate that service. I think they did a great job. I also attended Moore's annual meeting. I happen to be on their board, but I think it's important to note that Moore Rehabilitation Center has been in this community for over 30 years, and they're just doing a great job. They have over 200 people out in the community working, and I think that's important. that people with special needs have the ability to go out and work in the community and be among us. And that's pretty much it. I also, I think many of you saw the letter we read to the mayor. Supervisor Veerkamp was also at that event for the sayonara party for our Japanese guests that were flying back to Japan last Wednesday. So, yes, sir.
Mayor and or vice mayor and council, how's that? Acting mayor and council, whatever.
I'm acting.
One more thing I wanted to mention, I know there some emails went out this week about the upcoming police chief interviews on
Yes.
June 7th is the date. I have, though, made the arrangements. We will be finished by about 3:30 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Okay,
So
okay.
the break that you had scheduled, and we've rearranged so that you don't
So
have
we're going
that.
to be 8:15 to,
Yeah, 8:15 to
to about
approximately,
4
I would
p.m.
figure 4 o'clock, but we
Okay.
should easily be done. And yes, they are here at Town Hall.
thank
Yeah.
you.
So.
Okay, with that, I'll call the meeting adjourned, and we will meet again at the June 11th at 5 p.m. closed session, 6 p.m. regular session. Thank you all for attending.